At this point, the passage of time is just straight up diabolical. Because as of me making this video, it's been a little over 15 years since Brink came out. A seemingly innocuous title that sort of came and went with little cultural impact. And a game that also committed the cardinal sin of simply promising more than it could deliver. The meddling reviews, lack of content, and an unfavorable climate to try and branch out amidst a litany of military shooters dominating the early 2010s. It's very likely you've forgotten that this game even existed. But I haven't. In fact, there's been many occasions throughout the years where Brink has randomly crept itself back into my mind. When Titanfall was first showcased back in 2013 and touted its parkour mechanics and inclusion of narrative beats in its multiplayer matches, it immediately brought to mind Brink. Same thing when the finals dominated my rotation for a while a few years ago. Its hyper-stylized visuals and ability to choose body types also immediately brought back memories of Brink. That's not to say that Brink is in any way, shape or form some sort of misunderstood masterpiece or a highly underrated gem that players disavowed on the premise of it simply not being Call of Duty or Battlefield. In fact, Brink had a lot of issues. A meager selection of maps, bizarre progression, class balance issues, and movement mechanics that felt situational at best. And yet, I poured a ton of hours into this game and nearly unlocked every single achievement. I frequented a handful of servers that ran the same maps 24/7 and went out of my way to try and max out every single class. And upon revisiting Brink for the purpose of this video, I can both see why I was infatuated with this game in spite of its problems, and also why Brink struggled to find much in the way of any sort of long-term appeal. Either way, pressing play on this game for the first time in over 14 years, knowing I haven't touched it since, was quite the trip. And man is it refreshing to boot up a game and just see a classic vertical menu without any of that Hulu streaming service adjacent bullshit. It's also incredibly nostalgic to revisit a game from this time period and not be borderline harassed by in-game monetization, seasonal and battle passes, or pop culture crossovers that absolutely no one asked for. It also didn't take long for me to finally remember why Brink simply clicked with me more than it did for a majority of players who experienced it. For starters, there's really only one other even older game that Brink is reminiscent of, namely developer Splash Damage's previous game, Enemy Territory Quake Wars, where two teams take turns attacking and defending mission objectives in a class-based environment. In one of my earliest videos on this channel, I spoke at great length about the brilliance of the assault mode in Unreal Tournament 2004, and how it's still a mode that very few modern shooters try to imitate. And yet here in Brink, we get map-specific objectives that run the gamut from escorting VIPs, blowing up a piece of the environment to progress through the map, deliver a sample, etc. And while some of these objectives are repeated or iterated upon, they still feel highly contextual to the map you're playing, and it still makes me wonder why this approach to multiplayer and map design is sorely missing in today's shooters. The unfortunate trade-off to this design philosophy in Brink is that the map selection is very slim, even with the free DLC that arrived not long after the game's release. And there are also no other modes of play, so you'll always be seeing the same cutscenes with the player's own custom characters showing up as a nice touch, and the objectives remain identical every time. A broader map selection, more modes to choose from, and a bigger variety of objectives could have really gone a long way to strengthening the game's longevity. Elsewhere, the heavy emphasis on teamwork and class synergy is one of Brink's high points. Every little team-oriented interaction nets you experience points, and playing to your class strengths and abilities on both offense and defense is a lot of fun. Less exciting on the other hand is the somewhat lackluster gunplay. Guns don't really feel weighty or impactful, and the high time to kill can make firefights feel a little dry and stale. Then there's the overly advertised SMART system, a not so clever abbreviation for smooth movement across random terrain. This is essentially just an early iteration of all the movement mechanics that are commonplace in shooters today. You can vault, slide, mantle, and string together some very basic parkour maneuvers. This would have been fine if the maps had facilitated any of these mechanics, as a large chunk of the maps on offer don't really provide much in the way of experimentation or creative use of the SMART system. It just feels a little tacked on, and like so much of what Brink offers, it's something that just isn't fleshed out well enough. So yeah, Brink suffers from a slim list of maps to play, no other game modes on offer, strangely linear progression and some overpowered class abilities, on top of slightly stiff gunplay and undercooked parkour mechanics. Yet when the game is firing on all cylinders, when you and your teammates are coordinating to take on or defend mission objectives, when you do pull off some slick outmaneuvering by way of parkour, or when you're simply reminded of the fact that a lot of shooters released since Brink probably owes at least a thing or two to this game, be it if it was a conscious decision or not to iterate upon it. At that point, it's hard not to feel an overwhelming sense of nostalgia for this game, if only because it actually had the courage to not piggyback off of what Infinity Ward, DICE, or Treyarch were up to in the early 2010s. In a time of blatant military shooter oversaturation, Brink had the balls to want to be different, and that ambition at the very least motivated me to sink over 50 hours into it. That's more than just about any other AAA game to be released in quite a while. Thank you for watching.